Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
This is Paige, the co-host of Giggly Squad, and I want to tell you about a company that I've been loving, Olive and June. Olive and June gives you everything that you need for a salon-quality manicure in one box. And if you break it down, it really comes out to $2 a manicure, which is absolutely insane. It's also so easy to get salon-worthy nails at home with Olive and June. The difference between how your nails used to look when you did them yourself and now with the Mani system is a complete game changer. The best thing about Olive and June, too, is it's a quick dry. Dries in about 1 minute, lasts for 5 days, and full coverage in up to 1 to 2 coats. Visit oliveandjune.com/perfectmani20 for 20% off your first system. That's oliveandjune.com/perfectmani20 for 20% off your first system.
I'm Sandra, and I'm just the professional your small business was looking for. But you didn't hire me because you didn't use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has professionals you can't find anywhere else, including those who aren't actively looking for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role, like me.
In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you'll miss out on great candidates like Sandra. Start hiring professionals like a professional. Post your free job on linkedin.com/spoken today.
Hello and welcome to the Napoleonicist. It's day 3 of the Waterloo Remembered saga and the second in our triple bill of interviews on the forgotten foreign forces which had a role to play in the Waterloo campaign. Today we're discussing something that seems like a bit of a curveball, because we're looking at the role of Spain in the War of the Seventh Coalition, which was the conflict that decided the outcome of the Waterloo campaign. And I'm joined by the Spanish historian, Professor Alicia Laspra from the University of Oviedo. Alicia, how have you been?
I'm quite fine. With the coronavirus lockdown, I have lots of time to work and think.
And you'd probably rather be doing neither.
Well, I'm doing more than I should, in fact, because I'm very, very busy, as I think everybody is with this new situation anyway.
Tell us a bit about your own research.
Well, although I am in my training is the training of a philologist, because my studies were English philology, right, and literature and all that. I derived my research, most of my research, not everything, to analyzing 19th century historical and literary relationships between Britain and Spain. So I studied Britain as in what concerns Spain. I was lucky to have Sir Raymond Carr as the president of the board who judged my thesis in 1990.
Surely not.
Long ago, but he was ever since a very important influence and also a beloved friend. And he guided me somehow during the rest of his life. So I felt I have been lucky to be accepted by historians, right? Both in Spain and in Britain. And so, but yes, I do combinations, because I work on the history, but also on the way, for instance, British poets reflect Spanish history. So it's a combination, right? And my latest thing published was together with Bernard Beatty, who specialized mostly in Byron. We edited a collective volume on British views on Spain from 1814 to 1823. And together with my husband, who is a colleague as well, we met in the university as students. So we've been working together for more than 40 years now. We have co-edited a book on prose Spanish poetry of the Peninsular War in 2013. And just this very week, my 5 collective volume work has come out, 5-volume collective work has come out, published by Salamanca University. So, and this is the main researcher is Agustín Coletes, my husband. So that we had people working on poems on the liberal triennium in France, Germany, Portugal, Italy, and Britain. And we were in charge of the British volume. And this volume is just hot on the press. I mean, we haven't seen it yet, but it is already printed. So this is a project, a national project we had. So as you can see, we combine history and literary response to history in many ways. This is Wellington. My last work will be Wellington and Spain. My last work, but I'm devoting already all my time to that because it needs revision, right? The perspective.
Those who are familiar with the Waterloo campaign will know that there weren't any Spanish units at Waterloo, but there were plans for Spain to play a significant role in the preparations that were made for the War of the Seventh Coalition, that final struggle against Napoleon in 1815, with talk of mobilising 2 Spanish armies and sending them into southern France. In the end, how significant was Spain's decision to side with the coalition allies?
I think, unfortunately, in my opinion, as for Spain's role, I honestly think it was next to nothing. We have to be realistic, okay? And you are very kind, but it doesn't really match what I know, okay? The worst thing is that Spain had no choice. Spain could not support Napoleon, naturally. So she had no choice. And it makes me sad to think of the way all the allies were so happy to see Spain fall down, smashed, ruined, and devastated in the hands of an absolute, anachronistic, ignorant king. The older threat of the American Spanish provinces, well, it was a matter of time, right? But Spain was not forbidden. I mean, nobody wanted to allow Spain to continue with the remains of the old empire and all that. And for us to lose credit in the eyes of a new Europe was humiliating. If we compare this with the way La Grande France was recovered, okay, in the hands of a luckier, though not more acceptable, branch of the Bourbons, right? So Spain paid for everything, and I'm not being, exaggerate. I'm not exaggerating. I think Europe just didn't want Spain to recover any of its force, but it was not fair because, of course, Britain provided lots of money, lots of lives, but Spain took 10 years to overcome the economic crisis. 10 years economic crisis. So I don't think Spain had a role, and they didn't want her to have it, and maybe she didn't deserve it in a way. Spain as a country, right? Not the people.
So was neutrality an option for Spain? Obviously, politically, supporting Napoleon was not an option in the wake of the Peninsular War, since Spain had been invaded in 1808 by Napoleon.
Spain had no option because the Europe was there, and Europe was more interested in eliminating all traces of the French Revolution and of Napoleon's empire, that they did anything to even promote the Bourbons again, right? And then you only have to see the paintings and the images of those Bourbons, quite as stupid as ours, okay? But in fact, I think the Europeans preferred to recover France, even at the cost of smashing Spain. Spain didn't count at all, okay? So the preference was towards France, and the European powers agreed on that. And Spain was not strong, and also, as I say, the Spanish monarch did not inspire any respect. So we were doomed to the darkness.
And the Spanish army wasn't rated particularly highly for a lot of the Napoleonic wars, but by this point was definitely a much more effective force than it had been in the early part of the Peninsular War, wasn't it?
Well, you know, up to Trafalgar, we must remember that the Peninsular War began in 1808. 3 years earlier was Trafalgar. People seem to forget that it was only 3 years distance, right? So 3 years earlier, the British had smashed the Spanish Navy and for the benefit of France, in fact, because Spain was supporting France, right? So up to Trafalgar, the best Spanish army units were in the Spanish American provinces, mostly. Our navy was then quite strong before Trafalgar, but after Trafalgar, most efficient navy officers and soldiers had to move to the army, but they were not prepared for the army. I don't think Spain had a very good army, particularly in the peninsula. Maybe in the Spanish provinces, the American provinces, yes, but not in Spain. And those people, like Alava himself, had to adapt to a new way, a new profession. The Marquis La Romana was the same case, and many others. They became generals in the army, but they were not so efficient, naturally. I'm not trying to justify the wrong way Spain worked, you know, but it is true that this is a situation which is quite unusual, right? The best officers were in the Navy, then they have to join the army, and then there was this kind of misplace. I think it was doomed to fail. Well, I don't know. Uh, mm, Also, we had units supporting Napoleon in Denmark and all that. So La Romana had to come back to Spain and with that British help. So the army, in fact, was just next to nothing. There are the best units were those commanded by Generals Altona and Freire, the only ones that Wellington took into France. That was some reason, apart from Beltaro. So those were the only ones who crossed the Bidasoa River into France. And this tells you the units that Spain could counter, you know, because the initial victory in Bailen was a dream, right? It meant nothing, only the defeat of Dupont, the terrible disgrace of Dupont, but the invasion went on. It meant next to nothing. So armies could not be trusted, and Wellington was right at that.
And it says a lot about the quality of the units that you mentioned, particularly those under Frere, that Wellington took them into France in 1813-14, but then left other parts of the Spanish army behind, particularly because of concerns over their quality, but also in terms of discipline.
Yes, he was afraid. This is in the Wellington papers. You can see that he was afraid that the soldiers would charge on the people, on the civilians, because they wanted revenge and all that. So he even writes about this and says, no, I cannot allow many, because they will try to, you know, to make vengeance against the people, and they wanted France to raise. Okay, they were more interested in. Of course, it was natural because the people are not guilty of anything, and we know that the population, young people, young boys, did not want to join the Napoleon's army. French boys, French young people. So I understand Wellington was okay, and also he didn't need them. He had enough. He had enough support with his own army and all that. So I understand, we all understand that those best units were the ones, and then they were the ones which remained there until 1814 in the frontier, controlling and all that. This is nothing. Well, it's not a secret.
Someone you mentioned earlier was the one Spaniard who was at Waterloo, Miguel Alava, a future Prime Minister of Spain, who was a close friend of Wellington and had been his liaison with the Spanish government during the Peninsular War. Why was Alava at Waterloo?
Okay. Well, first of all, there were two more officers, Spanish officers at Waterloo, right? Nicolas de Minucier and also Jose Zayas, but they were just by chance. I mean, they had joined British forces, but they were an anecdote. And Alava, who was a firm liberal, and who had been imprisoned by the king, Spanish king, in 1814, right? Arose protests from the part of Wellington. Wellington became a very good friend of Alava all his life. And it was at the beginning when Wellington was in Portugal, Alava was sent there to join his staff. And since that moment, Alava proved to be very skillful at solving connection problems with other Spanish officers. He was a very good diplomatic in many ways. And so Wellington really showed that he liked him all his life. And this is what I use very often to contradict people who accuse in Spain, many historians accuse him of being pro-absolutist, Wellington being pro-absolutist, and it doesn't fit, because if he were so, he would not be such a good friend of a liberal, an extreme radical liberal. That is what Alava was. So Alava for me is a good tool, right, to put things in their right place. Alava, I think Wellington showed it. He even wrote to him in Spanish as late as, I think it was 1839 or something, writing in Spanish to him. Well, they normally corresponded in French, okay, but he even tried to use the Spanish just as a sign of, delicate, different, the delicate thing. But they are so different, these two characters. And then I'm sure that Wellington was very happy to invite Alava to join. Well, when Ferdinand VII came back to Spain, he put Alava into prison, right, because he was a liberal. But then Wellington and his brother protested so much that the king had to free him, and so he was sent to Paris. But he was being on his way to Holland, because he was going to be ambassador there. But on his way, he stopped to meet Wellington in Paris, and very soon, Waterloo, I mean, the real Napoleon's escape from Elba, etc., etc. So it was a coincidence. But then Wellington invited him to join his staff. This is why he was there, not to fight, probably not. Well, although he did and was in the middle of everything. And he wrote a very important letter, but I will not mention it because someone else will do. But he wrote a report, Alava, about all this, and it's quite really interesting. You will see. I don't know. Wellington offered lodgings, offered all kinds of help all his life to Alava. Funny, Alava was 2 years younger than Wellington only.
So the two men had very different mindsets, but as you say, there was a real bond between the two of them.
It is thanks to Wellington's attitudes to valuable people, I think. Even when the revolution in 1820 broke up, they had discussions, and Alava would tell him, "You already had your glorious revolution, let us have ours." So they did not agree, but they respected each other, and Alava felt at ease to confront his friend politically. But I'm sure that Wellington was, I always thought that a Tory, even if you were a Tory or you were a Tory, you would never be a Metternich. A Tory will always be let's use an anachronic word, not more liberal, more Democrat, more of a Democrat. After the revolution, the 1688, I think things already changed in Britain, and this change took longer in other countries, and this is probably the explanation. But of course, Wellington never was never angry with Alava's ways, and he didn't like the constitution. And Alava was called the Constitutional among Wellington's friends. Oh, the Constitutional came here, Mrs. Bernard would say. So, it's just funny. It's a very contradictory, but it just proves Wellington's ability to admire and to value people wherever they are feelings and political issues. It's quite funny. It's a very, very strange thing, isn't it?
Yeah, if there's one thing that characterises Wellington, it was his begrudging respect for people who are capable of doing a good job. You've touched on this a little bit already, but how active a role did Spain play in the discussions at the Congress of Vienna?
That was next to nothing. The Marquis, the representative, Marquis de Labrador, his main object was to make France pay for the damage caused, which is normal after a war. Those who lose the war have to pay for, and this is the usual thing, right? Because that war had destroyed Spanish economy and society and the industry and population rates. And the disappointing result showed that Spain was no longer considered a strong power. And this Labrador was not active at all. He could not compete, giving parties because more was solved in during the balls and parties and all that, and at the table than in the meetings. Okay, so he was not really good enough. But even if he had been very good, this is just with trying to predict what would have happened, which counterfactual is, which I don't agree with. But anyway,
absolutely.
The situation facts show that he was not able to get anything for Spain, and Spain was no longer valued. And this person was, in my opinion, quite unprepared for that responsibility. Giving the blame in only one person, is that enough? I don't know, but a more skillful person would have probably got a bit more, because Spain was completely abandoned, right? The Congress of Vienna meant that the Napoleon's plunder was distributed in the continent, but that the winning countries, but Spain got nothing and lost everything. Because I want to insist on that, okay? So, nothing. Spain was really, there was probably the feeling that Spain deserved it, because she still kept the Spanish provinces in America, and that the people would not admit that. Everything is just not just the feeble, the bad qualities of the representative. Okay, the powers did not pay attention to Spain in terms of, and because we had that kin, in some way they, I think, psychological at least, justified what they were doing. But Spanish people had died, a lot of them, and for that king who was just rubbish. Okay.
And you mentioned about the Spanish provinces. Is it the case that Spain's control over its colonies was shaken by the war against Napoleon?
Well, what you call the Spanish colonies, we call the Spanish provinces, but anyway, that's a question of language, no problem. But in the Spanish provinces, there were risings all the time. There were heroes who were descendants of Spanish people, not the naturals there, okay? All of them came from Spain. Their ancestors, grandfather, father. So there were Spanish people who joined there and then didn't want to work for the king, because they had to send the gain, lots of money and lots of goods every year, and there was a very strict control of all that. So they hated the metropole. I mean, they hated Spain, because they just. But it was not an attitude of the natives. We must remember that. It was the Spanish themselves, and their descendants, who just wanted independence to be stronger. And so this was reinforced. Canning, for instance, was very interested in Argentina, and he's praised in Argentina, but At the same time that he was helping Spain, he was sending troops against Buenos Aires. So it is just a situation that, and Spain in that sense had everything against a bad king. And the politicians, Spanish politicians who were a bit more clever, were just because there were representatives of the Spanish provinces in Las Cortes de Cádiz, for instance, right? And they were Spanish patriots, and they wanted to keep the connection with Spain because they knew that otherwise others would come. They would not be free as it was all the time, but more in a more subtle way, naturally. Anyway, I don't know, but no empire lasts so long as the one Spain built long ago, long before, So it was time for change, and this has always happened and will always happen. It's not natural. The problem is that Spain was really the object of kind of vengeance or smash. I mean, was really left ruined, absolutely ruined, and France should have paid. I mean, even if it were the Bourbons, it's the same. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, when you lose the war, you have to pay for that, and all countries did. But Spain got nothing, just ruin. So I'm not playing now with the weak role that we are so disgraced and all that. But this is what happened in the conference in Vienna. Spain meant nothing. The attitude was as if Spain had not sent any representative, they would have been happy as well, and they would have been doing all the things they did anyway.
So with that in mind, how does Spain remember Waterloo, the Peninsular War and Wellington? At the time there was controversy and resistance to the British troops, particularly in the wake of the sacking of San Sebastian. Yet Wellington was also highly decorated, so it's always struck me as quite a complex and slightly contradictory picture.
Well, this is a big mixture of topics that I try to combine. Wellington was much more valued at the time than he is now. I can tell you that. In fact, very few people are nowadays aware of British collaboration in the Peninsular War. If you take the history books that students use in secondary schools, high levels of secondary schools, there is a paragraph devoted to Wellington, 5-8 lines, no more. I have denounced this. It's not unfaith and gratefulness. It's just that history didn't want you. I mean, I don't know why. The historians in general, and there are many historians who are always trying to say that Wellington did more damage than good, and this is not fair, naturally. And Wellington never forgot Spain, but Spain forgot Wellington on purpose, in my opinion, because when you see those history books, this is not the real history, right? Bailén is a great thing, which of course it was a good thing psychologically, but nothing else, because the war went on and we lost everything, every battle and every fight. So Bailén has overshadowed the rest, and the image of Wellington as an absolutist, a very reactionary person, has grown, and there are still historians who are very successful in Spain. And the last book one of my friends published, it's called the War of the English, although he was not English. But anyway, we say that the Catalans do not want to talk about the War of Independence. This is what we call it, okay? But because it is the War of Spanish Independence, so in Catalonia, Spain cannot be mentioned. So they say the War of the French. The War of the French, right? La Guerra del Francés, in singular. This man published a book which is called, the title is The War of the English, calling Wellington English, right? And say he's always trying to show that Wellington was working for his country, not for ours, and was not objective and was not so good, and all these things are still selling. And I once presented in Southampton a paper on songs and poems devoted to Wellington in Spain during the Peninsular War, right? And this is and they are plays, songs, poems, everything. He was praised and he was really liked. It was a pity because I even took a recording with me for that presentation, but it didn't. The system didn't work. The technology. But
It's always late, isn't it?
yes, but there is music. There is, it's so funny. He was really acknowledged and he was really valued. But then history made its own work, and just maybe it was not on purpose, or it was just the need to praise Spain and to get a better self opinion and spread that on the population and all that. That Wellington is not really valued. And when you speak about when I ask my students in the university, do you know, or does it ring the bell if I tell you something about Wellington? They don't know. They don't know. They know nothing. I don't think this is fair. Okay. I don't think this is fair. Even after the commemorations of the bicentennial thing, Wellington, yes, but in close meetings or whatever. But there was no, and I was I was appointed member of this Peninsula War 200 committee. I used to go to London, to other places representing Spain, but I was always a bit ashamed because I could not contribute things that could be satisfactory for those people who were working so hard and came to Spain on many occasions, maybe. So in Spain, the British participation in the Peninsular War is almost neglected. No, not almost. It's neglected. It's not really, although there are many books and that, but this is just for scholars, for people, but not the mind. In the mind of people, it means nothing. And when I speak to, university students, not only ours, but in other disciplines, they don't know who Wellington was. That's not fair.
And where does Waterloo fit into that? Is Waterloo forgotten because Spain didn't play an active part in it?
Waterloo sounds. Waterloo rings the bell to people. Okay, Waterloo is considered as a good battle that maybe even associated to Wellington more than the Peninsular War in many senses. Yes,
Oh, wow.
in the general mind. Yes, because Wellington and Waterloo are really connected in mainstream, but not Wellington and Spain. It's funny, whereas Waterloo has nothing to do with Spain. But Waterloo is respected. It's valued like other important battles fought in the world, like important international events, right? But the people aware of the crucial collaboration of Wellington and Britain scarcely rings the bell. There's only a few. This is opaqueness, maybe on purpose. I don't know. I don't think it can be on purpose, but I don't know. I can't really explain the reason for this, right? The myth. I don't know. I really cannot explain. I always and I remember when the bicentennial we had lots of conferences. I normally was very lucky because I was invited to all of them. When I gave a speech or a paper or something, I could see immediately at the end of my speech, I could see those people who would reject Wellington, who would say something against Wellington, because I just could notice their faces and the way they looked at me, and normally elderly people, the elderly are more aware of, and so they would raise their hand and say, yes, but what about the Retiro thing, or what about Badajoz, what about San Sebastian? And I would say, but can't you even think of what the French did in terms of devastating the country? Is as these two or three episodes, horrible episodes. Nobody denies it. And Wellington had soldiers being hung for that. So how can you blame? I mean, how can you just have this in the imaginary so strongly fixed, and not the good things? I don't know why this is a phenomenon, social phenomenon. And I always realized, I always said that one is going to talk about Wellington against England, and I never failed. But it's just numbers, a few people. But the others, are just spectators. They just do not participate. But I never had anybody telling me, well, I have learned something about Wellington that I didn't know before. Thank you. Nothing. I'm not in charge of recovering Wellington's prestige. But anyway, I cannot allow for lack of faithfulness to history. This is just that.
And one final question from me. If there was one myth about Waterloo itself that you could explode, what would it be?
I know that Wellington is the one who shines for Waterloo, but I think the Prussians do not shine so much. And everybody knows that, but for them, things might have been different. Again, counterfactual history is not allowed, right? And I'm against it. But if you go to Apsley House, you can see all the presents Wellington got from Waterloo, from Blucher, from the Prussians, I don't know how you pronounce it there, anyway. And even they gave him a whole set of dishes and all this, I cannot remember the name, with the battles that he fought in Spain, in the peninsula and all that. I wonder, what did Wellington offer his friends, his collaborators, his Prussian collaborators? What did the country as well offer them? But particularly if he was personally rewarded, did he reward his collaborators and the Prussians who saved him? So that in that sense, the myth, in my opinion, is that he has all the visibility, all the prestige, and maybe he didn't want it, or I don't know, but history has done that, right? Wellington and Waterloo are one thing, whereas they are not, and the visibility of the prizes and the rewards and the presents and all that shows. And I do wonder whether in the other country, which doesn't almost exist anymore, Prussia, are there any counterparts, any equivalent objects or visual things that might remind us of what they did? This is the only thing I can tell.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it's actually something that people might want to discuss on social media and in the forum at the napoleonicwars.net. Alicia, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me for Waterloo Remembered. That was Professor Alicia Laspra from the University of Oviedo, joining me to discuss the Spanish perspective on the War of the Seventh Coalition. You can find full details of Alicia's publications and research projects by searching for her on researchgate.net. If you have any questions or comments, remember that you can get involved on Twitter using the hashtag Waterloo Remembered, or in the forum at the napoleonicwars.net, where you'll find a dedicated room for Waterloo Remembered. I'll be back tomorrow when I'll be talking to Vanya Bellinger about the role of the Prussians in the final instalment of the Forgotten Foreign Forces Triple Bill. But until then, I'm Zach White. This has been Waterloo Remembered from the Napoleonicist. Take care, my friends. Stay safe. And as always, thank you for listening.
Hey, it's Paige DeSorbo from Giggly Squad. High quality fashion without the price tag. Say hello to Quince. I'm snagging high-end essentials like cozy cashmere sweaters, sleek leather jackets, fine jewelry, and so much more. With Quince being 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And they partner with factories that prioritize safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. I love that. Luxury quality within reach. Go to quince.com/style to get free shipping and 365-day returns on your next order. Quince.com/style.